The truth behind forgotten homemade weapons that were used in World War I is far more brutal, improvised and, well, ingenious than most documentaries ever show. And if you're a real history buff or a survival-minded viewer, you already know that the trenches didn't reward the soldier with the best issued gear. They rewarded the soldier who could adapt, modify or build something on the spot when the official armory failed to deliver. So let me pull you in with something worth your minute. There were moments in 1915 and 1916 where official supply lines collapsed under the weight of industrial warfare. Entire units were handed rifles but no grenades, shovels but no close-quarters weapons, and gas masks that barely worked in the face of new chemical formulas. Yet, despite this, patrols still went out, trenches still had to be defended, and raids still had to be launched. So, how did soldiers manage? They turned trench lines into workshops. They turned broken tools into weapons. And they turned desperation into innovation. This guide takes you straight into that hidden world of improvised warfare, the forgotten homemade weapons that frontline troops actually used, and shows you not only what they were, but how the principles behind them still matter today for anyone interested in battlefield survival, historical authenticity, or practical improvisation. Right then, let's get into it. In this section, we're going to take a closer look at the trench-crafted clubs and the logic that drove their use on the battlefield. When early trench raids began, soldiers quickly realized that rifles were just too long bayonets often bent, and revolvers were a bit too slow to reload during close combat in those pitch-black mud tunnels. So they crafted trench clubs. Simple, brutal tools made from broken rifle stocks, cut-down shovels, or even sections of tree branches, hardened in campfires. Metal workers in support units sometimes fixed iron rings, nuts, or lead-filled caps to the striking end, giving the club the weight needed to drop an enemy instantly without the sound of a gunshot. The value here isn't in glorifying violence, it's in understanding the battlefield logic. When the environment restricts movement, a weapon must match that environment. And, that principle is still relevant in survival today. If you're ever stuck with limited space, awkward angles, or low visibility, the simplest tool often becomes the most dependable. A modern survivalist can apply the same thinking by reinforcing walking sticks, reshaping tool handles, or weighting simple implements for camp defense. The principle remains the same. A durable, low-tech tool can outperform a high-tech one in the wrong environment. Long before the standard-issue Mills bombs and stick grenades became common on the front lines, early trench fighters had to get creative. They fashioned their own explosive devices out of whatever was at hand: jam tins, ration cans, even old tin boxes, stuffed with any shrapnel they could scrounge up, like nails, bits of cut wire, ball bearings, or fragments from shattered shells. The engineers would then fill these makeshift containers with gunpowder or cordite, often salvaged from damaged munitions. Fuses were cut by hand, usually relying on nothing more than friction matches or a slow-burning bit of wick. These homemade grenades, well, they might not have looked like much, but honestly, they saved lives. They gave patrols the means to break up nasty barbed wire nests, clear out enemy sapheads and defend their own parapets, all before the army could deliver enough standardized grenades to go around. In the chaos and desperation of trench warfare, it was this sort of resourcefulness, making do with whatever you had, that often meant the difference between life and death. For a survival-minded viewer, the lesson here is disciplined resourcefulness. A jam-tin grenade mindset means understanding your materials, what burns, what ignites, what creates pressure, what fragments. While you obviously shouldn't be building explosives, the principle applies to firecraft, construction, and emergency engineering. Breaking bigger tasks down into the simplest available materials, using what you already have, and prioritizing reliability over appearance. Now, when we look at trench shotguns, hybrid weapons, and adaptability, it's clear that this mindset endures. In tricky situations, it's about making the most of what's on hand, thinking on your feet, and honestly not being afraid to get a bit creative when the chips are down. In some sectors, especially during night raids, soldiers cut down old hunting shotguns or repurposed break-action firearms brought from home. Others modified rifles to fire improvised buckshot cartridges, turning a long-range weapon into a close-range terror during storming operations. Even more fascinating were the hybrids' trench knives with built-in knuckle guards, saw-backed edges, or weighted pommels that allowed a soldier to strike, stab and block with a single compact tool. These weren't issued innovations. They were soldier-level adjustments. Units with access to carpenters, blacksmiths, or machinists often outperformed those that rigidly adhered to official equipment lists. The principle carries directly into modern fieldcraft. When you understand the full capabilities of your gear, not just the intended ones, you multiply your options. A field knife becomes a striker, a digging tool becomes a cutting wedge, and a walking staff becomes a stabilizer for shelter construction. World War I's improvised weapons weren't just weapons. They were proof that adaptability is a survival skill more valuable than any single tool. Improvised armour, gas defences and simple barriers, these were essential to survival on the front lines. Each adaptation, no matter how small, could mean the difference between life and death. Improvised armour isn't something most World War I discussions cover deeply, but soldiers absolutely built it. Troops in S-ape points sometimes reinforced wooden planks with metal plates from ration boxes. Others added leather padding from torn kit bags to create makeshift arm or torso shields for advancing across open ground. Gas protection saw the same pattern. Before functional respirators were issued, soldiers soaked handkerchiefs in urine, bicarbonate mixtures, or just simple water to neutralize chlorine gas long enough to evacuate a trench. The takeaway here, especially for survivalists, is clear. When technology fails, simple barriers and chemical countermeasures still save lives. You see the same logic today in improvised respirators made from charcoal filters, layered cloth, or water-soaked fabric when smoke or chemicals threaten a camp. You know, the principle hasn't changed in 100 years. When your lungs are in danger, the simplest filtration is better than no filtration. The legacy of simple filtration endures, adapting through generations. It's a reminder, really, that even the most basic barrier can save lives. So, let's not forget, sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective. Stay prepared. Stay safe. The legacy of forgotten homemade weapons used in World War I is a reminder of what humans create when necessity presses in from all sides. These tools weren't symbols of brutality. They were proof of human adaptability. They reveal how ordinary soldiers, often with no engineering background, built solutions under pressure using nothing but field scrap, broken gear and instinct. And if you're passionate about survival or military history, this knowledge should deepen your understanding of real-world improvisation far more than any polished museum display ever could. If you want more guides that dig beneath the surface of history and extract lessons you can actually use, subscribe to Battlefield Survival and share this video with someone who appreciates real history told with honesty and depth.